High Counselor Miran's hand shook as she watched the display screens that surrounded her command center. Each screen told the same terrible story. Red symbols marked the enemy ships that circled her world like hungry predators. Blue symbols showed what remained of the Velthran defense fleet, and there were so few blue symbols left. Another destroyer lost, Counselor, her tactical officer reported. His voice was hollow and tired. They had been fighting for 3 days without rest. Miran closed her eyes for a moment. That was the 8th ship they had lost in the last hour. Only 12 vessels remained between the Kritak Dominion and her people. 12 ships against nearly 200 enemy warships. The mathematics of survival were simple and brutal. Below her orbital command station, Thessia Prime turned in peaceful silence. Cities glowed on the night side of the planet. Farms and forests covered the day side. 3 billion Velthran lived down there. 3 billion gentle souls who had never wanted war, who had built their civilization on trade and art and science. They did not deserve what was coming. Status of the planetary shields? Miran asked, though she already knew the answer would be bad. Holding at 42%, Counselor. The engineers estimate 6 hours before total failure. Maybe 7 if we divert all remaining power. 6 hours. Miran felt those words like physical weight. In 6 hours, the Kratok bombardment would begin. Their kinetic strikes would turn cities into craters. Their invasion forces would descend on the survivors. The Kratok did not believe in quick deaths. They believed in examples. They believed in terror. Send the distress signal again, Miran ordered. Maximum power. Route it through all the emergency channels. Her communications officer worked at his console, then looked up with sad eyes. Counselor, we have been broadcasting for 18 hours. The Korvathi Federation has not responded. Our allies have not come. Miran knew this. Deep in her heart, she had known it since the first Kratok ships appeared at the edge of their system. The Korvathi Federation, their supposed friends and protectors, had calculated the cost of this fight and found it too expensive. Somewhere in a safe council chamber, far from the sound of dying ships and screaming civilians, the Korvathi had decided that Thessia Prime was not worth saving. Send it anyway, Miran said quietly. Someone must hear us. Someone must care. The communications officer nodded and began encoding the message. Miran watched him work and felt very old. She was 143 years old, which was not particularly ancient for her species. But today she felt like she carried the weight of centuries. The distress signal pulsed out from their station, racing through space at faster than light speeds. It carried all their hope and all their fear in compressed data streams. It told the story of the Velthran people. It explained the Kratok invasion. It begged for help from anyone who would listen. The signal passed through relay stations and communication nodes. It bounced through the vast network that connected the civilized galaxy. It reached the Korvathi Federation headquarters, where it was received, logged, and quietly ignored. It reached other governments and organizations, most of whom marked it as someone else's problem. The signal traveled outward, growing weaker with distance, until it reached the very edge of explored space. There, in a region most species considered dangerous and worthless, it was detected by a small listening post orbiting a frozen moon. The listening post was new. It had only been operational for 4 months. Its crew consisted of 12 humans who spent their days monitoring the galactic communication networks and trying to understand the complex politics of species they had only recently met. Lieutenant Marcus Webb was on duty when the Velthran distress signal arrived. He had been half asleep watching the usual chatter of merchant reports and weather updates, when suddenly every alarm in the communication center began screaming at once. Jesus Christ, Marcus shouted, nearly falling out of his chair. His coffee mug hit the floor and shattered. He ignored it and focused on his screens. The distress signal was impossible to miss. It pulsed with desperate urgency across multiple emergency frequencies. Marcus had trained for this moment, but training and reality were very different things. His hands moved quickly across his controls, isolating the signal and running it through translation software. "Oh God," Marcus whispered as he read the translated message. "A civilian population under attack. Defense fleet shattered. Orbital bombardment imminent. Request immediate military assistance from Allied forces." Marcus hit the emergency button that connected him directly to Captain Elena Vasquez, the commanding officer of the UENS Indomitable. The heavy cruiser was currently docked at the military station 3,000 kilometers from the listening post. "This better be good, Webb." Captain Vasquez's voice came through the speaker. She sounded annoyed. Marcus had probably woken her up. "Captain, we have a priority distress signal. Civilian population under attack. They are calling for help from their allies, but I don't think anyone is coming." There was a pause. When Vasquez spoke again, her voice had changed. The annoyance was gone, replaced by sharp focus. "Send me everything. I want full translation and location data." "How far?" Marcus checked his calculations twice to make sure. 4 days at maximum jump speed, Captain. Maybe 3.5 if we push the engines past safety limits. They won't last 4 days. Not from the sound of this signal. Another pause. "How many ships do we have in range?" Marcus switched to the fleet tracking display. Human vessels were spread thin this far from Earth, but there were some nearby. Indomitable, obviously. 2 destroyers, the Vigilant and the Striker, 3 frigates conducting patrol operations. The carrier Liberty is 5 days out, but could make it in 3 if she pushes hard. That's 23 ships total if everyone responds, Captain. 23 ships. Vasquez said it like she was testing the weight of the words. "Do we know how many hostiles?" "The distress signal mentions nearly 200 enemy warships, Captain. They identify them as Krytok Dominion forces." Marcus waited. He had only been with the fleet for 8 months, but he knew Captain Vasquez's reputation. She was tough and smart, and completely unwilling to back down from a fight. But this was insane. 23 human ships against 200 enemy vessels, to save a species they had never met, in a star system that meant nothing to Earth's strategic interests. "Webb, I want you to send a flash priority message to every human vessel within jump range. Tell them we have a distress call from a civilian population under attack. Tell them I am taking Indomitable to render assistance. Any ship that wants to join me should plot a course immediately. Make it clear this is voluntary. No one will face discipline for staying behind." "Yes, Captain, but..." "Captain, the odds..." "I can do math, Lieutenant. Send the messages. Then pack up your listening post and prepare to jump to the Liberty. You won't be safe here if things go bad." The connection ended. Marcus sat alone in his communication center, staring at his screens. He began composing the messages, his fingers moving automatically while his mind raced. 4 days. A civilization would die in that time. Children would die. Families would be torn apart. Cities would burn, unless 23 human ships from a species barely known to the galaxy decided to do something completely crazy. Marcus sent the messages. Within 30 minutes, every human ship in range began charging their jump drives. Not a single vessel declined. On Thessia Prime, High Counselor Miran watched her screens and counted down the hours until her world would die. She did not know that help was coming. She did not know that Deathworlders had heard her cry and decided to answer. But she would know soon. Warlord Zathok was enjoying his victory before it even happened. He reclined in his command throne aboard the dreadnought Crushing Fang, watching the tactical displays with satisfaction. The Velthrin were broken. Their pathetic fleet was down to 7 functional warships. Soon, very soon, he would give the order to begin orbital bombardment. The Krytok Dominion had rules about conquest. Rule 1 was always make them suffer. Make them understand that resistance was futile and painful. Then, when they were properly terrified, take the survivors as slaves. The Velthrin would make excellent slaves. They were weak and docile and already trained to follow orders. "Warlord," his sensor officer called out. "New contacts at the system edge. Unknown signatures." Zathok barely glanced at the display. "More Velthrin reinforcements?" "Destroy them." "No, Warlord. These are not Velthrin ships." "Configuration unknown. Reading 23 vessels." They are accelerating directly toward us. 23 ships." Zathok felt a moment of curiosity, then dismissed it. His fleet numbered 197 warships. What could 23 ships possibly accomplish? Perhaps some foolish mercenary group thought they could make a name for themselves. "Hail them," Zathok ordered. "Let us hear what these idiots have to say before we kill them." The communications officer worked at his console, then looked up confused. "Warlord, they are not responding to any hails. They are not broadcasting on any standard frequencies. Then they are not worth our time. All ships maintain bombardment positions. When those fools get close enough, 3rd and 4th battle groups will break off and destroy them." Zathok watched the unknown ships approach. They were moving fast. Faster than most civilian vessels could manage, but nothing impressive by military standards. He noted their strange designs. The ships were thick and heavily armored, built like flying fortresses rather than the sleek vessels most species favored. The range closed. 40,000 kilometers. 30,000. The unknown ships should have started decelerating by now if they intended to fight. Instead, they accelerated harder. Warlord, those ships are pulling 15 gravities of acceleration. That should kill any crew inside. Jothok felt his first flutter of unease. 15 gravities? What species could survive such forces? Launch fighters. Have them perform a close scan of those vessels. 20 Kratok fighter craft screamed away from the crushing fang, their pilots eager for easy kills. They closed on the nearest unknown ship, a vessel about the size of a Kratok destroyer. The unknown ship opened fire. Jothok watched in shock as the strange vessel's weapons tore through his fighters like they were made of paper. The guns did not fire plasma or lasers like civilized weapons. They fired solid projectiles, thousands of them per second, creating walls of metal that simply erased his fighters from existence. What is this? Jothok roared. What are we fighting? He got his answer when the unknown fleet smashed into his formation. There were no rules to what happened next. No tactics from any military manual. The strange ships did not maneuver like warships. They maneuvered like attack animals, like predators who had spotted prey. A human destroyer, the UEN's Vigilant, executed a turn that generated 20 gravities of lateral force. Its crew, strapped into shock couches and wearing compression suits, barely stayed conscious. The ship's reinforced frame, built to withstand Earth's crushing gravity during atmospheric entry, held together. The Vigilant came out of the turn with its nose pointed at a Kratok cruiser and fired every weapon it had. Kinetic rounds traveling at a significant fraction of light speed punched through the Kratok vessel's shields like they were not there. Missile pods opened and unleashed smart torpedoes that wove through point defense fire with impossible agility. The cruiser exploded. This scene repeated across the battlefield. Human ships dove into the Kratok formation with absolute disregard for their own safety. They fought at ranges most species considered suicidal. They rammed when their weapons ran dry. They used debris fields as cover and asteroid fragments as improvised projectiles. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, her knuckles white as she gripped her command chair. All ships break formation. Free engagement rules. Find targets and kill them. The Indomitable shuddered as Kratok plasma fire hit its armor. The thick plates, designed to protect against micrometeorite impacts at relativistic speeds, absorbed the damage. Vasquez barely noticed. Bring us around. Target that carrier. Guns free. The heavy cruiser's main railgun spoke. Magnetic coils accelerated tungsten penetrators to speeds that turned them into focused explosions. The Kratok carrier's hull crumpled like tinfoil. Captain, we have hull breaches on decks 7 and 9, her damage control officer reported. Seal them. Marine teams prepare for boarding actions. This was the moment the Kratok truly began to understand what they faced. Human Marines encased in powered armor that turned them into walking tanks. Used the hull breaches as entry points. They crossed the vacuum between ships using magnetic boots and maneuvering jets. Completely at home in an environment that would kill most species in seconds. Sergeant Maria Santos led her squad through a gaping hole in a Kratok frigate's hull. Inside, the ship was chaos. Atmosphere vented through damaged sections. Gravity fluctuated wildly. Emergency lights flickered. Contact front! Someone shouted. Kratok warriors rushed toward them, firing their plasma rifles. The Marines returned fire with weapons designed for urban warfare on Earth. Armor-piercing rounds punched through Kratok battle armor. Grenades bounced down corridors with mathematical precision. But what terrified the Kratok most was when the firing stopped, and the humans came forward with blades and bare hands. The Kratok considered themselves apex predators, bred for combat. But they had evolved on a world with normal gravity and gentle weather. Humans had evolved on a nightmare planet where everything tried to kill them. A Kratok warrior, 2.5 meters tall and massing over 200 kilograms, tried to tackle Sergeant Santos. She sidestepped with the reflexes of a persistence predator, grabbed his arm and used his own momentum to slam him into a bulkhead. The impact would have stunned a human. It killed the Kratok. Bridge is 3 sections forward, Santos called out. Move, move, move. On the crushing fang, Warlord Jothok watched his fleet die. In 17 minutes, he had lost over 60 warships. The unknown vessels had taken casualties too, but they seemed completely unable to understand when they should retreat. One destroyer, crippled and venting atmosphere, its crew dying from radiation exposure, accelerated directly toward his flagship. Destroy that ship. Jothok screamed. Point defense guns opened fire. They hit the destroyer again and again, tearing it apart piece by piece. But the ship kept coming. At the last moment, when the destroyer was barely 100 meters from the Crushing Fang's bridge, it detonated its reactor. The explosion was small by space combat standards. It was not large enough to destroy the dreadnought, but it was perfectly positioned. The bridge windows, designed to withstand meteor impacts, cracked. The blast wave sent the massive ship tumbling. Jathok pulled himself up from the deck, his head ringing. Half his bridge crew was dead. The other half stared at their stations in shock. "All ships, retreat! Jump to Rally Point Gamma. Retreat now!" The order went out. The Kratok fleet, or what remained of it, activated their faster-than-light drives and fled. Nearly 100 warships vanished in flashes of twisted space. The human fleet did not pursue. They could not. 8 of their 23 ships were destroyed. Another 6 were heavily damaged. But they had won. On Thessia Prime, High Counselor Miran watched her sensors with trembling hands. The Kratok fleet was gone. The unknown saviors had broken a force 10 times their size in less than 20 minutes. "Get me a communication channel," she whispered. "I need to know who they are." The response came in broken Galactic standard spoken with a strange accent. "This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the United Earth naval ship Indomitable. Sorry we took so long. We came as fast as we could. Your planet is safe now." Miran sat down heavily in her chair. Earth. Humans. She had heard rumors of the newcomers, the strange species from a world most considered uninhabitable. She had never imagined they could do this. "Thank you," she said, and her voice broke. "Thank you for saving us." The human medical frigate descended through Thessia Prime's atmosphere like a falling star. Its hull was scarred from the battle, showing burns from plasma fire and impact craters from kinetic weapons. But it flew steady and true, guided by pilots who had trained in conditions far worse than a peaceful planet's gentle gravity. High Counselor Miran stood at the landing field with what remained of her government. Around her, Veltran civilians gathered in the thousands. They came to see their saviors. They came to understand what had happened in the sky above their world. The medical frigate touched down with surprising grace. Its landing ramp extended and figures emerged. Miran felt her breath catch. The humans were so strange. They walked upright on 2 legs like the Veltran, but there the similarities ended. They had no fur, just bare skin in various shades of brown and pink. They were tall, some nearly 2 meters in height, with dense muscle visible beneath their clothing. Their eyes pointed forward like predators. But what struck Miran most was how they moved. Every human walked with contained energy, like they were ready to spring into action at any moment. Even their medical personnel, dressed in white uniforms with red crosses, moved with predatory grace. A human woman approached. She wore a dark blue uniform with insignia Miran did not recognize. Her hair was black and pulled back tightly. A scar crossed her left cheek. She stopped a respectful distance away and spoke in careful Galactic standard. "High Counselor Miran, I am Captain Elena Vasquez of the United Earth naval ship Indomitable. On behalf of humanity, I offer our assistance to your people." Miran tried to speak but found her voice had abandoned her. She had prepared a speech, something formal and appropriate for this moment. But looking at this human woman, this warrior, who had saved her entire civilization, the words seemed pointless. "Why?" Miran finally managed. "Why did you come? We are nothing to you. We are strangers." Captain Vasquez looked genuinely confused by the question. "You called for help. We heard you. What else could we do?" It was such a simple answer, too simple. Miran had lived her whole life in galactic politics where every action had a price, where aid came with strings attached, where species calculated cost and benefit before acting. "But your losses," Miran said. 8 ships destroyed. How many of your people died saving strangers? 2,347 crew members gave their lives, Vasquez said quietly. Each one a volunteer. Each one knew the risks. Each one would do it again. Behind Vasquez, other humans were unloading medical equipment from the frigate. Miran watched them work. They moved with efficient purpose, setting up field hospitals and triage centers. Some humans, clearly doctors, were already treating wounded Veltrin who had been brought to the landing field. Miran saw a human doctor, a young man with kind eyes, kneeling beside a Veltrin child who had been injured in a bombing. The doctor worked carefully, his large hands surprisingly gentle as he bandaged the child's arm. He spoke softly in broken Veltrin, trying to comfort the frightened youngster. "We need to talk," Miran said to Vasquez. "You and your people have saved us, but we do not even know what humanity is, what you are, where you come from." "Of course, counselor. My crew is establishing orbit now. Once your people are receiving medical care, I would be honored to meet formally." The meeting took place 6 hours later in what remained of the Veltrin Council Hall. The building had taken damage during the bombardment, but it still stood. Miran thought that was appropriate somehow. Everything had changed, but some things endured. Captain Vasquez brought 3 of her officers. They sat across from Miran and her advisors, and for a long moment, everyone simply stared at each other. "Tell us about Earth," Miran said finally. "About your home." Vasquez glanced at her officers, then began. "Earth is a Class 12 death world in the outer spiral arm. Surface gravity 10% higher than galactic standard. Violent weather patterns. Extreme temperature variations. Atmosphere with higher oxygen content than most species can tolerate. Predators in every ecosystem." She said it matter-of-factly, like she was reading from a report. But Miran felt cold horror creeping through her. A Class 12 death world? Such planets were considered barely habitable. Most species avoided them entirely. "How?" Miran asked. "How did your species evolve on such a world?" "Adaptation," one of Vasquez's officers said. He was a tall man with gray hair and sharp eyes. "Humanity is the result of 4 million years of evolution in the worst conditions imaginable. We learned to run for hours to chase prey. We learned to throw projectiles with deadly accuracy. We learned to work in groups to take down threats much larger than ourselves. We learned that giving up meant dying. Our ships," Vasquez continued, "are built to survive Earth. That is why they seem so heavily armored to you. That is why we can pull maneuvers that would kill most species. We are not stronger or smarter than other races. We are just adapted to harsher conditions." Miran processed this information. It explained so much about the battle she had witnessed, the impossible accelerations, the close-range combat, the utter fearlessness. These were not tactics. This was how humans naturally fought. "We owe you a debt we can never repay," Miran said. "You owe us nothing," Vasquez replied firmly. "We did what anyone should do. We helped people who needed help." After the meeting ended, Miran returned to her office and began researching humanity. What she found both amazed and terrified her. Humans had only achieved faster-than-light travel 20 years ago. They were newcomers to the galactic community, barely noticed by the major powers. But in those 20 years, they had established colonies on a dozen worlds. They had built a fleet from nothing. They had forced themselves into galactic politics through sheer determination and their history. Miran read accounts of human history and felt sick. Wars that killed millions. Weapons that could destroy entire cities. Atrocities that made the Kratok Dominion look gentle by comparison. Humanity had spent 10,000 years learning to kill each other with ever-increasing efficiency. But she also read about human art and music and literature. She read about humans who had sacrificed themselves to save others. She read about revolutions fought for freedom and dignity. She read about a species that contained multitudes, capable of both incredible cruelty and stunning compassion. The information spread across the Veltrin communication networks. Within days, everyone on Thessia Prime knew what humans were. Deathworlders, predators, warriors who came from a nightmare planet and fought like demons. Fear spread alongside gratitude. The humans had saved them, yes, but what did they want in return? What price would they eventually demand? Miran called another meeting with Captain Vasquez. She had to know the truth. "What does humanity want from us?" Miran asked directly. "Alliance? Resources? Territory?" Vasquez looked surprised by the question. Counselor, we want nothing from you. We came because you needed help. That is all. No species acts without self-interest, Miran pressed. The Korvathi Federation abandoned us because defending us was not profitable. What makes humans different? Vasquez was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft, but intense. Counselor, humans know what it means to cry for help and have no one answer. We know what it means to face extinction alone. We know what it means when the strong prey on the weak and no one cares. We will not let that happen to others, not when we can stop it. But at such cost, Miran whispered. You lost 8 ships, over 2,000 of your people, for strangers. They were not strangers, Vasquez said. They were people who needed help. That is enough. Meanwhile, in the dark spaces between stars, Kratok survivors limped back to their empire. Warlord Jathok stood before the Dominion High Council, his scales still scarred from the battle. What defeated you? The council leader demanded. What force could break 200 warships? Demons, Jathok said, and his voice shook. Creatures from a nightmare world. They call themselves humans. They fight without fear. They die without hesitation. They are unlike anything we have faced. How many ships did they have? 23. The council chamber fell silent. 23. Ships had broken a fleet of 200. It was impossible. It was terrifying. This cannot stand, the council leader said. The humans have humiliated the Dominion. They must be destroyed. Jathok wanted to protest. He wanted to tell them that fighting humans was suicide. But he was a warrior of the Dominion. He had his orders. The Kratok began planning their revenge. The Kratok war fleet assembled at the edge of their empire like a storm gathering strength. 500 warships drawn from a dozen conquered systems, bristling with weapons and carrying armies of warriors eager to restore their species' honor. Warlord Jathok commanded the fleet from a new flagship. The Bone Crusher was even larger than the Crushing Fang had been, a mobile fortress designed to break planets. Around him, his bridge crew worked with focused intensity. They all knew what was at stake. Victory would restore the Dominion's reputation. Defeat would be unthinkable. Send the message to Thessia Prime, Jathok ordered. Let the humans and their pets hear our demands. The communication went out across space, carried on frequencies that all species monitored. It was meant to be heard not just by the Velthrin and humans, but by the entire galaxy. This is Warlord Jathok of the Kratok Dominion. We offer terms to the Velthrin Collective and their human protectors. Surrender immediately. The Velthrin will be taken as slaves. The humans will be executed as an example. You have one standard day to comply. Failure to surrender will result in the complete destruction of Thessia Prime. We show this mercy once. We will not show it again. On Thessia Prime, High Counselor Miran listened to the message and felt her world collapsing again. 500 ships. The Kratok had brought 5 times the force that had nearly destroyed them before. Even with human help, how could they possibly survive? She met with Captain Vasquez in the human command center that had been established in orbit. Vasquez listened to the Kratok ultimatum without expression. 500 ships, Miran said quietly. Captain, you saved us once, but this is impossible. Your fleet cannot stand against such numbers. You are correct, Vasquez said. My fleet cannot, but I am not alone. She brought up a tactical display. Miran saw ship icons appearing across the screen. Dozens of them. Scores of them. The United Earth Naval Ship has dispatched the 3rd Fleet under Admiral Chen Wei. 87 warships, including our newest Dreadnought-class vessels. They will arrive in 3 days. 87 ships against 500, Miran said. Captain, the mathematics are not in our favor, Vasquez agreed. Which is why we are not just bringing ships. Over the next 3 days, Miran watched as human engineering teams swarmed through Thessia Prime's orbit. They brought with them massive construction modules, prefabricated weapon systems, and strange equipment that she did not recognize. The humans worked with frightening efficiency. They seemed to need little sleep and less rest. Teams worked in shifts that overlapped, maintaining 24-hour construction schedules. When Miran asked how they could sustain such pace, a human engineer just shrugged and said, "This is nothing. You should see what we build when we are actually under pressure." The weapon platforms took shape in orbit. Each platform was massive, bristling with railguns and missile systems. But what caught Miran's attention was the names the humans gave them: Pearl Harbor, Nanking, Auschwitz, Hiroshima, Rwanda, Srebrenica, Wounded Knee, Guernica. "What are these names?" Miran asked Captain Vasquez. Vasquez's expression darkened. "They are places where humanity failed, places where we were not strong enough or fast enough or brave enough to stop atrocities. Each platform bears the name of a moment in human history where innocent people died and we did nothing to help them. Why would you name weapons after your failures?" "To remember," Vasquez said simply. "To remember what happens when we choose safety over justice, when we calculate cost before we consider conscience. These platforms are not just weapons. They are promises. Never again will we stand by while the innocent suffer." Miran felt something shift inside her. She began to understand humans a little better. They carried their guilt like armor. They turned their shame into strength. On the third day, the human Third Fleet arrived. Miran watched from her command center as 87 warships transitioned from faster-than-light travel into normal space. They moved in perfect formation, a display of discipline that matched their ferocity. The flagship was enormous. The UN's Terra's Fist was nearly 2 kilometers long, its hull covered in armor thick enough to shrug off weapons that would vaporize normal ships. It bristled with enough firepower to level a continent. Admiral Chen Wei's face appeared on Miran's communication screen. He was an older human, his hair gray, his face lined with age and experience, but his eyes were sharp and alert. "High Counselor Miran, I am Admiral Chen Wei. My fleet is at your disposal. Admiral, the Kratok have 500 warships, even with your reinforcements. We have 110 ships total counting Captain Vasquez's vessels," Chen said. "The Kratok have 500. But Counselor, warfare is not always about numbers. Sometimes it is about will. Sometimes it is about who is willing to pay the highest price." "What price are you willing to pay, Admiral?" Chen was silent for a moment. "Any price necessary. We did not come all this way to watch another civilization die." The Kratok fleet arrived on schedule. 500 warships moving in a formation designed to intimidate and overwhelm. They expected surrender. They expected terror. What they found was the human fleet waiting in orbit above Thessia Prime, surrounded by the weapon platforms, with the Velthrin's rebuilt defense fleet positioned in support. Warlord Jothok stared at his tactical display in disbelief. The humans had not fled. They had reinforced. They had prepared. They were going to fight. "Send the attack order," Jothok said. "All ships advance. Show these Deathworlders what real military power looks like." The Kratok fleet surged forward. 500 ships moving as one, their weapons charging, their warriors ready for battle. Admiral Chen watched them come. "All ships hold position. Let them close to optimal range. Velthrin forces, target their support vessels. Third Fleet will handle their main battle line." "Admiral," one of his officers said nervously, "they outnumber us 5-1. "Yes," Chen said calmly, "but we have something they do not." "What is that, sir?" "Experience fighting when outnumbered. The battle began at a range of 50,000 kilometers. The Kratok opened fire first, launching thousands of missiles and plasma bolts. The human fleet responded with point defense systems and electronic warfare, but the humans did not retreat. They did not maneuver defensively. Instead, they accelerated directly toward the Kratok fleet. "All ships," Chen ordered. "Execute Protocol Thermopylae." Miran did not know what that meant. She learned quickly. The human fleet split into multiple groups, each group targeting a different section of the Kratok formation. They moved with such speed and precision that the Kratok admiral could not respond fast enough. Before he could adjust, the humans were inside his formation, fighting at ranges where their heavier armor and more powerful weapons gave them advantage. The weapon platforms opened fire. Railguns accelerated projectiles to incredible speeds. Missiles launched in waves, each wave coordinated with the others to overwhelm point defenses. The platforms had been positioned perfectly, creating crossfire zones that the Kratok could not avoid. Captain Vasquez, commanding the Indomitable, led her battle group directly at the Kratok flagship. "All power to forward shields. Prepare for ramming speed." The Velthrin forces, inspired by human courage, pressed their attack. Their lighter ships harassed Kratok supply vessels and troop transports, preventing reinforcements from reaching the main battle. But the Kratok had numbers. For every ship they lost, there were 5 more to take its place. The human fleet took terrible damage. Ships exploded. Crew compartments vented to space. Hundreds died with every passing minute. Yet the humans did not break. They did not retreat. They fought with a desperation that the Kratok could not match, because the Kratok were fighting for honor while the humans were fighting for survival itself. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of Terra's Fist and made a decision. All ships, this is Chen. Execute Jump Protocol Gamma. Admiral, his tactical officer said, that protocol is theoretical. We have never tested it in combat. The risk is acceptable. Execute now. What happened next violated several laws of physics and broke every rule of faster-than-light travel. The human fleet scattered across the battlefield simultaneously activated their jump drives while still deep inside Thessia Prime's gravity well. The risk was catastrophic. Jumping inside a gravity well could tear a ship apart. Doing it with enemy vessels nearby could cause cascading failures. But the humans had practiced this maneuver in secret, using Earth's massive gravity to test the limits of their technology. The fleet vanished and reappeared instantly in the heart of the Kratok formation. The enemy ships, expecting the humans to be scattered, suddenly found themselves surrounded. Chaos erupted. Kratok vessels fired on each other in confusion. Human ships emerged from the jump at point-blank range and opened fire with every weapon they had. Warlord Jathok watched his fleet dissolve into panic. All ships break formation. Jump away, jump now! But it was too late. The Terra's Fist appeared directly in front of the Bone Crusher. Its massive plasma cannons charged and fired. The Bone Crusher's shields collapsed. Its armor melted. Its reactor breached. Jathok died instantly, vaporized by temperatures that matched a star's surface. The Kratok fleet broke and ran. The silence after the battle was almost worse than the noise during it. High Counselor Miran stood in her command center and watched the tactical displays as they updated. Red icons representing Kratok ships fled in all directions. Blue icons representing human vessels drifted in orbit, many of them trailing atmosphere and debris. The price had been terrible. 29 human ships destroyed. Another 43 damaged badly enough that they would need months of repairs. Over 7,000 human crew members dead. The numbers felt impossible. How could anyone pay such a cost for strangers? But they had won. Against 500 warships, against impossible odds, they had won. Captain Vasquez appeared on Miran's communication screen. Her uniform was torn and burned. Blood stained her left sleeve. But she was smiling. Counselor, Thessia Prime is secure. The Kratok will not be returning anytime soon. Captain, I do not have words. Your losses were worth it, Vasquez said firmly. Every single person who died today chose to be here. They chose to stand between your people and harm. That choice mattered to them. It should matter to everyone. 3 days later, the Veltran Council held a formal session. They had invited Captain Vasquez and Admiral Chen to attend. The vast chamber was filled with representatives from all across Thessia Prime and its colonies. Everyone wanted to see the humans who had saved them. Miran stood at the central podium. She had prepared her speech carefully, working on every word for days, but now looking at the humans standing quietly to the side, she realized that formal words could not express what needed to be said. Captain Vasquez, Admiral Chen, people of Earth, you came when we called. You fought when others fled. You died protecting people you had never met. The Veltran Collective owes you a debt that can never be repaid with words or resources. She paused, gathering her courage for what came next. We offer instead the only thing of value we have, ourselves. The Veltran Collective formally requests alliance with humanity. Not as clients to patrons, not as the weak seeking protection, but as equals, as friends, as family. The chamber erupted in applause. The sound was deafening, thousands of Veltran expressing their approval. Captain Vasquez stepped forward. She looked uncomfortable with the attention, but she spoke clearly. On behalf of the United Earth Government, I accept your offer of alliance. We are honored to call the Veltran our friends. Admiral Chen nodded his agreement. And we hope this is just the beginning. The galaxy is a dangerous place. Perhaps it is time for those who believe in protecting the innocent to stand together. The formal ceremony lasted hours. Treaties were signed. Agreements were made. Plans were discussed for future cooperation. But the most important moment came at the end, when Miran and Vasquez simply shook hands. Thank you. Miran said quietly. "Thank you for trusting us." Vasquez replied. News of the battle spread across the galaxy at the speed of light-speed communication. Within weeks, every major government knew what had happened at Thessia Prime. The reactions varied dramatically. The Korvathi Federation, which had abandoned the Velthran, found itself in crisis. 6 member species formally withdrew from the Federation, citing the Thessia Prime incident as proof that the Korvathi could not be trusted to honor their defense commitments. The Federation government tried to maintain stability, but the damage was done. They had calculated wrong, and now they were paying the price. Other prey species, those who lived in fear of aggressive neighbors, began sending quiet inquiries to Earth. Could humanity help them too? Would the humans be willing to extend protection? The messages came from dozens of worlds, each one telling stories of threats and fears and hopes that someone might care. The predator empires watched with growing alarm. The humans were too dangerous. They fought too well. They seemed willing to die for principles rather than profit. This made them unpredictable. This made them a threat. In a secure location far from any planetary system, representatives from 18 galactic governments met in secret. This was not an official gathering. No records would be kept. No one would admit to attending. The human problem must be addressed, said Ambassador Krell of the Vanthar hegemony. His species had been a dominant military power for 3,000 years. The thought of newcomers challenging that dominance was intolerable. They are savages from a death world, agreed Representative Shorn of the Meridian Compact. Barely civilized, barely controlled, they solved the Thessia Prime situation through brute force and reckless sacrifice. Yet they won, pointed out Councillor Thane of the Azurite Confederacy, against a fleet 5 times their size. That cannot be ignored. What do you propose? Krell asked. Containment? Sanctions? Military action? Any military action against humans would be costly, Thane said carefully. They have proven they do not surrender easily. Perhaps diplomatic containment would be wiser. The debate continued for hours. Some argued for appeasement, offering trade agreements and territorial concessions to keep humanity happy and quiet. Others pushed for isolation, surrounding human space with hostile buffer states. A few whispered about preemptive strikes hitting Earth before humanity could grow any stronger. But one delegate remained silent through all of this. Ambassador Viridian was old, even by the standards of her long-lived species. She represented the Eternal Archive, a civilization that had existed for over 50,000 years. They had seen empires rise and fall. They had watched species destroy themselves and others flourish. They kept records of everything. Finally, Viridian spoke. Her voice was soft but carried authority that made everyone listen. You are all thinking about this wrong. You see humanity as prey or predators, as threats or resources. You are trying to fit them into categories you understand. But humans are something different. What are they then? Krell demanded. Survivors, Viridian said simply. They evolved on a world that tried to kill them every day. They survived ice ages and plagues and volcanic winters. They fought wars that should have destroyed them and came back stronger. They are the only species I have ever encountered that turns trauma into determination. That makes them more dangerous, not less, Shorn protested. Perhaps, Viridian agreed. Or perhaps it makes them exactly what the galaxy needs. Think about what happened at Thessia Prime. The humans did not ask for territory. They did not demand payment. They simply helped people who needed help. When was the last time any of us did that? The chamber fell silent. The question hung in the air, unanswerable and uncomfortable. I have studied humanity's history, Viridian continued. Yes, they are violent. Yes, they are dangerous. But they are also capable of remarkable compassion. They create art and music and literature. They sacrifice for each other. They believe in ideals that most of us abandoned millennia ago. Justice, freedom, the protection of the innocent. Perhaps instead of fearing them, we should learn from them. You suggest we simply accept these newcomers as equals? Krell asked incredulously. I suggest that we recognize reality, Viridian said. Humanity is here. They are not going anywhere. We can either work with them or against them. History suggests that working with survivors is generally wiser than fighting them. On Earth, in the city of Geneva, a memorial was being built. The Thessia Wall would list the names of every human who had died defending the Veltran homeworld. 7,216 names carved in stone, each one representing a person who had made the ultimate choice. Admiral Chen Wei stood before the partially completed wall. Workers moved around him, carefully engraving names with laser precision. He read each name as it appeared: Johnson, Martinez, Kim, O'Brien, Onwudiwe. Each one a person he had commanded. Each one a person he had sent into battle knowing they might not return. "Do you regret it, Admiral?" a voice asked behind him. Chen turned to find Captain Vasquez approaching. She had been promoted after the battle, given command of the entire Thessia Prime defense fleet. But she had come back to Earth for the memorial dedication. "Regret saving the Veltrin?" "Never," Chen said. "But I regret every name on this wall. Every family that lost someone. Every child who will grow up without a parent." "They chose to be there," Vasquez said. "I know, but that does not make it easier." They stood together in silence, watching the workers. More names appeared: Kowalski, Nkosi, Takahashi, Patel. "What happens now?" Vasquez asked. "The Velthrin want our help building a joint defense fleet. 6 other species have sent requests for alliance. We are becoming exactly what we never wanted to be: a military power, a galactic enforcer." "No," Chen said firmly. "We are becoming what we always should have been: protectors. The galaxy has enough conquerors and exploiters. Perhaps it needs someone who fights for different reasons. And when the cost becomes too high, when we lose not thousands but millions," Chen turned to look at her directly, "then we pay that cost, because the alternative is watching innocent people die while we calculate whether saving them is profitable. That is not who we are. That can never be who we are." On Thessia Prime, Miran walked through the reconstructed sections of her capital city. Human engineers had helped with the rebuilding, sharing technology and techniques, but more importantly, they had worked alongside Veltrin crews, teaching and learning in equal measure. She stopped at a park where a monument had been erected,